Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Engadget Podcast for the week of April 1st. Gentlemen, the myth, the phone that we've been hearing about for a long time now.
Fully leaked.
HTC's Facebook's not making a phone, but HTC is making a phone. It's the second HTC phone for Facebook, which is just rife with imagination for jokes.
Well, yeah, and it's funny that it's their second one that they've done. Not the first, not even the first Facebook phone they built.
Right. It's the first Facebook phone without a Facebook button, I guess you could say. But yeah, it is a curious name. I mean, it's kind of almost a cheeky reference to the One, maybe. They're trying to keep in the same family. I don't know, but it is a strange name.
Yeah. Well, where do we even start with this one? I mean, I think it's not an app. It's not a new app, and it's not a full-blown, they're not actually building the phone. Obviously, they're part of the new HTC, but they really did something that splits the difference in an interesting way, which is to basically offer a launcher. And anybody who is maybe a power Android user has at some point or another installed an alternative launcher like ADW or Nova. Nova was the one that I've been using the most on different devices lately, but something that kind of takes over your home screen experience and lets you have something really different than what the manufacturer puts on there.
Yeah, this is the next Facebook, basically. This is it, which is a pretty significant shift from them, a company that was just a year ago making a significant investment in making an HTML5-based app for all this stuff. Now they're shifting away to making, A, great dedicated apps, but B, they're making, this was going to be the future of Facebook. They're basically saying that the web is passé at this point, and the apps are the way forward, more or less, and even beyond apps, this full phone experience.
So does that mean this wouldn't necessarily work on something like iOS, though, right? Like
Absolutely
that's
not.
the kind of question that how is this the future of Facebook?
They're very much
targets one huge piece of the market, admittedly, but not the entire market.
Yeah, they're tying their horse to the Android market at this point. Because
they don't have a choice because there's no other platform that gives them this flexibility.
Yeah, presumably we'll see some new iOS apps that will give the look and feel of this experience, but ultimately won't have the integration that they were showing off today with pictures of people popping up as you're doing other tasks and getting real-time notifications from people too. You can replicate some of that stuff in iOS, but you won't get anywhere near the level of integration that they're showing here. So that's I don't know if that's going to be a strike against iOS so much. I guess we'll have to see how popular this remains to going forward, but it is certainly a strong vote of confidence in Android.
Well, I think what they're doing is I think it's clever. I think that whether or not they're able to get people to install it is another matter, and how they go about to do that, because again, it's not something that I think that probably the vast majority, 90% plus of Android users have no idea that this is something that you can do with your phone.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it was more than 10% of people that had any idea. So educating the public on something like this is complicated. This is a lot. Even you have to remember, like you go back 5 years, even the concept of installing an app was really foreign to the average phone user.
Yeah.
And so we just have finally gotten to a place where the average phone user even like understands and is familiar and comfortable with that. The idea that you're going to have them completely take over their home screen experience, that's where it starts to get a little bit challenging, and whether it's just something that, next time you log into the Facebook app, you get prompted to do this or it downloads it. It tries to get you to download it in some other way, or whether they're going to do a big marketing and branding campaign. I don't know. I do think that it is limited to a set number of devices. The things I've heard is that it's the HTC One, One X, One X Plus, the Galaxy S3 and Galaxy S4 from Samsung.
And the Note 2 as well.
And the Note 2, but whether or not it'll be even available for other devices, I guess maybe it might work, but they don't guarantee it'll work.
Yeah, there's certainly the potential for things to go wrong in installing this because there is a lot of customization involved, I would think. So I'm very curious to see how it looks on other devices, Motorola devices. Luke in chat just made a very good point. Doesn't Microsoft have a big investment in Facebook? And they do. I think it's 8% or 10%. It's pretty significant.
I don't... No, it's not. It's not as big as that, but it's not 10%. But it is significant. And they've sold some of those shares from what I understand.
Okay.
I think that was actually, it's funny that he says that, because my next question was going to be, does Windows Phone really lose out? Because I think one of the things that Windows Phone has been trying to do is to position itself as the mobile OS that is integrated with your social life, with your Facebook profile and Twitter to a lesser extent.
Even DB10 to an extent as well with the hub stuff there, and that integrates all of your social networks and whatever else. So,
yeah. So, I'm sure no one at Microsoft is very happy about this.
Sure.
I think that, but from Facebook's perspective, Android use is growing so quickly that I mean, if they can actually get people to install it, it'll certainly be a good, a long-term valuable thing for them.
It's separate from the app, though, right? Like it's not just an evolution of their app to something called Facebook Home. It's a whole separate app, correct?
Yeah, it's like taking the app and kind of smushing that right into the OS, to every aspect of the operating system. So it's a big step beyond an app, but whether functionally people really get that concept of having a proper Facebook phone. I mean, this is ultimately turning your phone into a Facebook phone. Whether people like that idea, whether they want that level of integration. A lot of people check Facebook 5-10 times a day. I think in terms of repeat traffic over the course of a day, I think it's the number one site out there. So I mean, I think there's some outrageous numbers about how many people check Facebook every day,
huge.
and how many people check it multiple times each day. So in a lot of ways, it makes sense to integrate it right into the phone. But how many people really want that hitting them over the head all the time versus them going out and pulling it down? I'll be very interested to see the numbers. I'm sure they're going to be huge.
I think the question is, if you're someone that uses Facebook a lot and has a lot of your social life, social world revolves around Facebook, or is at least represented through Facebook in some way, then having a phone that is aware of that social context, I think could add value for a lot of people. I mean, look, I think everyone knows I'm not a fan of Facebook. I've been probably annoyingly vocal about that. But I do think that if there's no reason why, again, if you are an active Facebook user and you get a lot of value out of Facebook today, that like it couldn't enhance the messages, enhance messaging, enhance the photo experience on the phone, enhance the calling experience, which actually I think a lot of teenagers probably don't do a lot of anyway at this point. But there's no reason why it couldn't be a really great way of enhancing and adding value. Sure. I think the question is, again, it comes back to like, are people really gonna figure this? Are the people that are gonna get value from something like that the same people who are gonna be savvy enough to do the installation of something like a launcher?
Gadget Hero in chat points out they were at, I think 1.6%. They're down now to 1.3% ownership.
Yeah, that sounds like that's right. I was just gonna say it's definitely not 10%.
Okay. So the date will be the 12th of April. It'll be hitting those limited devices we mentioned before, but we'll see if it's actually restricted to those devices. I mean, presumably there'll be an APK that you can download very quickly as well to try to install on your phone. And the phone itself, the HTC First, will be hitting AT&T exclusively on the 12th for $99 on contract. We haven't really talked about the phone itself much, but it's a 4.3-inch device, 720p display, kind of a mid-range-ish phone at this point. Certainly not going to be threatening the HTC One by any means. Although it's kind of funny, HTC actually has a copy-paste error on their website. There are two pages on the HTC site with specs, and one of them says it's a 5-inch phone with a 1080p display. The other one is a 4.3-inch phone with a 720p display. So somebody, copied and pasted the HTC One specs into the first specs. Yeah. So what happens even to HTC?
So the phone seems like the kind of least exciting part of the news, right? Like the phone is kind of a bland Android phone.
I'm sure it'll be a fine phone.
It's fine, right? It's not particularly negative, but
no, it's
not
really
anything positive, exciting.
And with this interface being pushed out to all these other devices, it doesn't even have that as a strong selling point.
Not just other devices, but like major devices, right? Like the S4, the Note 2, et cetera, et cetera.
So I wonder if this is an opportunity for HTC to get their brand out there, because Peter, we've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks since the HTC One launched, that it's an amazing phone, but people don't have the recognition of HTC. Do you think that this is HTC trying to piggyback on Facebook, and maybe Facebook will throw some of their marketing weight behind this device?
Well, I mean, I think there was the thought that they would do that with the Cha-Cha, which I think was called the Status here in the US, and which was, I mean, that phone did not perform very well at all. And when I talked to people at HTC about it, they said that the QWERTY was actually a big issue, where the market had shifted so far away from QWERTY devices that,
which is sad.
That the target audience of teenagers and things like that just were not interested in it. But I mean, I do think that there was a compelling reason for both sides to do this. I think for Facebook, having it come on hardware, I think sort of would help allay some of the concerns about, well, is anyone really ever going to use this? And it kind of was a proof of concept that it could be done, and this is what it would look like, and that there are going to be people from day one with this on their phone. I think for HTC, that obviously it's a meaningful partnership with Facebook makes a lot of sense for them, and I think that they need to be doing stuff like this. They don't really have much of a choice, and I don't think Samsung was going to do it, and Motorola obviously wasn't going to do it, and BlackBerry wasn't going to do it. So there weren't necessarily that many. Nokia wasn't going to do it. So there's certainly not that many other. Maybe LG would have been another option there, but there weren't that many potential partners, and since they already had that relationship with HTC, it made sense to extend it. I think from HTC's standpoint, they certainly didn't want to put this on their flagship phone, the One, and there's no reason to do that. And
why not?
Well, because I think that they didn't necessarily want to tie their flagship phone just to being a Facebook phone. I think that they wanted to be able to build that brand independently of Facebook and build that franchise, and that's ultimately what they need to do, along the lines of what Samsung has successfully done with the Galaxy S line, which is to build it into a flagship franchise. They need to be able to do that with the One, and they're really trying to do that. I think also there's the idea that a Facebook phone needs to be not necessarily the most expensive phone you can buy, but something that is sort of affordable to teenagers and young people, and so setting this up as a mid-level. I mean, it's a funny thing that even a mid-level phone is a 720p display. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
This would have been a premium device a year or 18 months ago.
Even 8 months ago.
Yeah, or even sooner. So it's not a bad device. It's just not premium with respect to now. But
You think teenagers though want that? Like, you're right that I think the price point matters a lot to teens, but there's also the iPhones are cool, right? The Galaxy is a cool phone. Like, if I was a 16-year-old, I wouldn't say like, I want to get the HTC first. I want the One or the S4 or whatever,
I mean,
right? Like,
maybe the market's moms now, right?
Yeah.
So who don't want to spend a lot of money on a phone either.
Sure.
I mean,
my mom is using Facebook.
I
shouldn't ask you. You don't use Facebook.
No, my mom does.
My mom
uses Facebook. Totally.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
actually think that
at least 3 moms are using Facebook.
Yeah, I actually think that Facebook is almost more associated with moms now than young people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, which may be decreasing the cool factor that HTC is going after here.
That's the other question, though. Yeah, absolutely. Like, Facebook is, I think, largely moved away from being something that college students and teens use, and it's more like Twitter is something they're using or other services altogether.
And a lot of my friends on Facebook who were my friends in college are also now moms. So,
right. That's another part of it.
Shifting
Absolutely.
demographics for sure. Interesting tweet from Living On a Prayer here, suggesting that HTC and Facebook could have done something interesting if they'd sold this for $200 off contract and kind of turned this into like a Nexus-like program, which would have been an interesting attempt. But then the question is, would Facebook be making enough in advertising to really pay for that? And at this point, there's actually no ads in home at this point. So obviously, this is an investment for Facebook.
The economics don't make sense because HTC has to make money off the phone, and Facebook isn't prepared to. Facebook isn't subsidizing the phone in the way that Google is prepared to subsidize, or at least sell at cost a Nexus device. And I also don't think that Facebook is ready for that yet. I mean, there might be a point where they say, "Okay, we're making enough. We can see that the lifetime value of a Facebook Home user is so great that we can subsidize the device in some way." But I don't think it's going to be there for a while.
It's also, I was harping on the thing before with regards to it being a separate app, because it seems like when they say that this is the next evolution of Facebook, that seems like kind of that they're not necessarily fully backing that concept if they're releasing it as a separate thing, right? Instead of just evolving the app into Home. Like, I have a separate Facebook Messenger app that is just Messenger, and it's junk. It drives me crazy. Like, the app is fine, but I don't want a separate Facebook app on my phone, right? Yeah. I mean, maybe it's a little different if it's a launcher instead of an app, but I don't know. That seems like halfway towards what they really say they're trying to do. I don't know.
Brian Heater has joined chat, by the way, so
yeah, I know.
I just want to make sure everyone's aware. He's watching us now.
Hey, Brian.
Wow, now that I know Brian's watching, I'm all nervous.
I'm going to go lick everything on your desk.
This guy should be nervous,
Everything.
though. Filling in.
So anything else to add about Facebook before we set that status mark complete and move on to our second
The only thing I say is that until they sent out that invitation about, like, our new home on Android, no one was predicting a launcher.
That's
as far
true,
as I can tell, I don't think
true.
anyone predicted a launcher. I think
the phone,
people thought, like, oh, it'll be a
right.
phone with all this stuff baked in, but nobody thought. So, I mean, I'll give them credit for that. I think that was it was an ingenious way to address the issue. It has some very serious challenges in terms of getting installations. But if they can figure that out, and they probably have thought about it, or at least I really hope they thought. Actually, I really hope they haven't thought about it at all. But
we went through just throwing it at the wall and see what happens.
But it's a clever idea.
I guess so. One question before we leave this topic: 6 months from now, what does Facebook look like on iOS and on Windows Phone and BlackBerry? I mean, are we going to see significant changes there too, or is it going to be more or less the same as we see now? Just asking for you guys to speculate wildly.
I'm not sure there's that much they can do drastically different. I mean, I think that they'll probably, even though Ben doesn't like this, that to have separate apps for different types of services. I think that they think that there's a compelling reason for that. Much in the same way that there isn't a single Google app, but there's YouTube and Google Maps and Google Voice and all these things that you can get for iOS or even.
Those are all such bigger services that they want to do with Facebook.
Sure, but I think Facebook has the aspiration, right? They want to replace.
Sure. The need is the question.
And I think that I think this is one of the challenges that Facebook has that they have not necessarily been that great at developing. I mean, all the like their Instagram clone failed, right? Their Snapchat competitor failed, and I think that their attempts to build these sort of new services or these competitive services outside their core application have not necessarily been that successful. And so I think they see something that's maybe more holistic, like Home, as a good way to solve that problem.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that the idea of something like this, or like Google Now on iOS, I'm a long-time iOS user just because that's been my ecosystem for the past 6 years, and I'm locked in. But that's really appealing to me, but I'm like, not with Facebook, right? Like Google Now is appealing because it has all these other services that I use anyway, and it's providing me all this information. But Facebook is something that I check like casually to see like baby photos or whatever, right? Like to see what my friends are up to who aren't necessarily heavy internet users. And it's
to check in with your mom.
To check in with my mom. Literally, yes. To check in with my mom to see what she's doing, or my dad, or my brother, or whatever, right? People who I might not have a phone conversation with every single day, but I would like to check up on a regular basis.
So many mom jokes.
So many mom jokes.
So many mom jokes we're leaving on the table, people.
I hope they're not in the chat room.
Where's
my
Brian
mom is 73,
all
some
these
respect,
mom
folks.
jokes? If only Brian were here, we'd have so many mom jokes.
Brian, could you make some more mom jokes in the chat room, please?
Please make some.
We'll read them on the air.
Yes, we will. If any of them are worthy of doing so.
It's just very strange to me because I don't think of Facebook in that same way, though, right? Like I think of Facebook as, it's not a feed for me. Like Twitter is like a feed, like something that I will watch, and that's something I can participate with. Whereas Facebook is something that I check intermittently because it's not the same flood of information. It's not the same. It's not providing the same service that something like Twitter is. So
I think for a lot of people that is their news.
That's so strange.
And if you look at, I mean,
who are these people?
What
are they doing?
That's what they're doing. But I think if you look at Blink feed in the HTC One, I mean that isn't in some ways more as useful or more useful for a lot of people is to have Facebook baked into the experience in that way, and to sort of rethink the home screen.
And it's interesting that this replaces that. I mean, HTC made a big deal about that at the One launch, and now they're pushing that aside for this.
Well, it is actually. I think it's a great point that HTC, even before they've launched their new flagship and with their highly touted new Sense experience, they are also partnering with someone that has announced that they're going to obliterate that from the phone.
Yeah, it just goes to the rampant fragmentation of Android, but also the power of the OS itself, that you can do these sorts of things and come up with multiple compelling experiences. And I think that's one of the reasons that Android is as popular as it is, because you can deliver these customized experiences because people don't all want the same thing.
Well, I know we keep talking about this, but I wonder how much of this is about the Chinese market, and which Facebook has been so weak in. And if you look at the Chinese market, I mean, almost all of the Android, especially, all the homegrown Android devices that are strong there are so much about their own customized launcher and experience, and I don't know, maybe they are thinking about this being a way for low-cost Android handset makers to quickly get something out there which is appealing.
And that'd be a great way for Alcatel or ZTE or Huawei to try to step up a little bit more too in this market as well if they wanted to. The best Brian Heater could come up with. I poked Tim's mom yesterday. I'm sorry to say.
That's because Facebook you can poke. That's the joke.
Disappointed, Brian.
Is what he's saying.
Disappointed.
I'm disappointed.
All right, so let's move on to something that you guys sit next to on the couch there, which is the Ouya console.
I thought you were talking about this Angry Bird.
No, the Angry Bird's always watching us from afar. A review of the Ouya console went up yesterday, which Ben helped me quite a bit with, so thank you.
Sure.
Now that
Thank you for writing it.
Oh, yeah.
Sincerely.
I enjoyed that. Ouya console is, of course, the $99 Kickstarter success, $8-point-something million. The second biggest Kickstarter success of all time.
Compare size, but this doesn't really help.
It
Yeah.
is
Not
it
helpful
is
at all.
Doesn't
an
everyone have that
Android-powered
same doll in
device.
Come
their
on.
house for reference?
Tegra 3, with I think it's a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core chip. Is that right?
I think so. It's
believe
definitely
that's
quad
right.
core. I don't know if it's 1.7 gigahertz.
So, it's basically, a mid to high range smartphone in a box, more or less, with no display.
But it's plugged in,
It
which
is
is
plugged
something
in.
I always want to point out when we talk about the mobile internals, because the Tegra 3 is normally not, super powerful. But when you don't have battery constraints to deal with, it can be pushed a lot harder.
And it's still, we did a consumption test to see exactly how efficient it is, and it pulls down. A maximum I saw was 6 watts while playing the ball. But usually in most games it was 4.5 to 5 watts, which compares to like 180 watts for the first gen PlayStation 3.
Yeah. They brought that down a lot.
They
since.
did, but even so, you're talking sitting at a menu on a PlayStation 3 is like 20 to 30 watts,
Yes.
which is 5 times what you're going to ever see out of the Ouya. So that's impressive, but ultimately there are a lot of issues with the console. Probably most of them circle around the controller itself,
Yes.
which is probably the most important aspect of design in a console is the controller, because it's the piece you're holding in your hands, obviously. And the one on the Ouya's is pretty disappointing for a variety
As
of
you can
reasons.
see how comfortable it is to remove these
Right.
plates for the batteries that are underneath. I mean,
Right.
So this is like representative. This one side. Like when this shipped in the box, it comes with this broken off, which looks not
Right.
wonderful, and it's just a shipping error, presumably.
So we're talking about the face plates on the left and the right side of the controller, which pop off. The idea being that you can replace them with multiple colors if you want to, and
Right.
they cover the batteries as well, which slide into the grips, which does give a good balance and weight to the controller. But they're only held on by 6 magnets, and everyone that I've seen received has been received with those popped off, which I presume means that they pop off in shipping. And they're
think.
sort of just floating around in the box, basically, getting ready to damage whatever they want to. But those faceplates, they don't sit flush. They kind of stick out a little bit. They pop off really easily. And most troublingly, the buttons get stuck underneath them.
That's really, and it's replicable. Every
Right.
single time I push the button in. I mean, for our video viewers, I wish you could zoom in and see this, but you can literally. I don't know how well you can see that on the video.
Can't
but
at all, I'm sure.
I can't
Yeah.
at all. Great. But yeah, you can totally pop in the button and
Right.
it stays in. Like it's not. It's something that could very easily happen by accident, and it's the main button on
Right.
my controller too,
Yeah,
which is even worse.
I've had controllers, like third-party controllers, where you had to
all
push
of them.
really hard, and you could get it to stick if you really wanted to. But this one is like, half the time when I'm just playing the game, I will get the O button to stick, which is the kind of the primary button on the bottom, the one that you're going to be using most often.
Right.
And then on my console, and the only reason we have these, by the way, is because we are backers.
Right.
Ouya has not shipped any actual review units yet. We haven't figured out how many they've shipped, but it isn't that many. Do you know what backer number you are, perchance?
I don't. I wasn't super early in it, so it wouldn't. It's really strange actually, because there's 50, 60,000, something like that they're
Yeah.
shipping out, and I backed way after they had succeeded. So it's
Really?
not
Okay.
like. I don't think it's in any particular order. Maybe they were really nice and new. I mean,
It's
I told
possible.
them I had backed it, so maybe they just bumped me up, and that's possible. But I don't know.
I was number 230, so I think it's because I was early that I got one. But,
Yeah,
but
you
I've
were
heard of
early.
numbers in the
Right.
10,000s that haven't gotten their console yet. So I'm trying to figure out, work my way backwards to see if it is indeed related to that.
We'll have to talk about where you find that number later on. Because,
Yes,
yeah,
it's
I'm
in
interested to find
email
that
on
out, too.
December 14th, as a very kind gentleman on Twitter informed me. I actually
Okay.
didn't know that myself. So the control. Oh, also, yeah. So on mine, the right analog stick gets stuck. If I hold that up for a second and let go, it stays up for about 3 seconds before it
That's
pops
just
back down.
bananas. That is. It doesn't do that on this one, thankfully. I mean, you're talking like when you push this up, it
Yep.
stays.
Yep.
Like you can see this one clicking back,
Yep.
so it's way worse than this. You're
And
saying.
I wonder if that wasn't perhaps caused by the faceplate floating around.
It could have been,
during
right.
Shipping. These all came from Hong Kong, by the way, shipped directly from Hong Kong.
Also, the thumbstick on the right side, regardless of whether or not it sticks on yours, there's a ridge that
Yeah.
it runs into between where the touchpad is and the faceplate, and it repeatedly gets caught there, which is just like, so this is I've freaked out a lot in the past about touchpad controls like iOS or Android games where they shoehorn in virtual buttons, and how god awful that is for games that weren't designed for that, right? And this is a similar beef where like that one time it doesn't work is enough for me to be like, I don't want to play this game anymore, because if I can't trust the buttons every single time, like 100% of the time, then I'm not. It kills the experience so quickly, right? It's not like a couple of times and you get over it or you work around it. It's like immediate, and that's a huge problem, right? Like that's something that's really going to be a problem when the Ouya arrives in June.
And there's also latency as well, which was more of a concern for you than for me, but definitely it's
I'm really surprised that you didn't encounter it as much. Actually, we talked about this a little bit before you were at the review and stuff, and it's something that last week when they did the hands-on at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, where literally every person I had talked to who played it had experienced it, and it was like, I want to make sure I'm not crazy because this seems like a huge problem. And yeah, every game journalist I had talked to who had also checked it out had experienced that issue, and reading previews after the fact. But it's something that could be patched out presumably in software, but it's like another major issue.
I'm concerned that there are so many layers between the Ouya software and the actual hardware that's receiving these signals that it's going to be real difficult for them to optimize that path to get that latency down. I don't know.
I don't know enough about development to know. That's why I'm like, I know Wii U is doing that, right? Like their software is super slow, so they're patching that in supposedly to make it load faster. But I don't know that you can patch out latency like that, right? Like I'm not.
It's a really hard problem to address.
Sure.
And it can require hard, engineering resources that the company might not have.
Right.
Sure.
I don't know.
So that's the other thing also, right? Like I was talking to a friend of mine who had ordered a Pebble, and they were really excited. They got their watch, and there were some initial issues though where they needed tech support, and the tech support just took forever because it's a small startup, and Kickstarter is what backed them, and there isn't a support staff there, right? There isn't a company with a support staff, and as a result, it took him weeks to get a response. And I've heard similar things with Ouya stuff so far, right? Like you had issues and you've contacted support and haven't heard back.
Yeah, whenever we're doing a review and we have an issue, whenever possible, I like to try to go through the normal support channels just to see how it would be if somebody was actually doing it. So I had issues buying a game where basically the games would say, you don't have a credit card on file, too bad. And then they wouldn't say how to add a credit card to the file. And there's no menu in the Ouya, by the way, to add a credit card. Right. If you go to the FAQ, it says, well...
Live in your Ouya.
That's right.
Let them escape. Right. They'll take your credit card number with them.
But seriously, if my credit card were to be invalidated tomorrow because it got stolen or something like that, and I needed to change my credit card number, I don't think there is a way for me to do it.
No, right. There's no management. Right. So there's no... UI or software built in for that, right? You'd have to call them.
Do they take bitcoins, or is that
no? Thank goodness.
Sadly, no.
Boy, that would have made things even worse.
That's ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous on so many levels. But the Bitcoin story is ridiculous. Yeah, maybe we can talk about that later. So the controller, lots of issues. Sadly,
yes.
The console itself.
It's a pretty control. Let's say positive things too. It's nice looking.
I think it's comfortable in the hand.
I'm okay with the thumbsticks when they don't stick to a specific area. I don't love that they're convex rather than concave. That's a personal beef. Joe P., our engineer, would disagree, but I think he's a crazy person for that.
I concur with you on that front.
I like how matte, the plain black matte background. Like I like the weight. It's got some good heft. But I mean, it's got
triggers
other major issues.
I mean, ultimately, to me, it feels like, a third-party controller, but not even a modern third-party controller, because there really aren't that many bad third-party controllers these days. But back in like the Nintendo 64 days, when people were buying a lot of awful controllers just because they suddenly had 4-player games and they needed a lot to
kind of like TV exclusive, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know. The kind of experiences they've got there so far are, I'd say, a very poor representation of what the console I think is potentially capable of doing.
Right. So I mean, that's where we had to hope for. I basically wrote this review. At all, then I can see this is kind of a good way, and a good easy way to get into it. But really, it's hard to imagine there are that many people who haven't kind of started to move into those directions at this point.
Yeah.
I could maybe imagine it as something that parents buying for their kids if they want to spend really the least they can get away with.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
For Christmas or something, just like you load it up with a bunch of games and you spend $130 or something, and you have a console for children.
The problem is there's no parental controls on the console.
That's actually, that's a kind of huge problem.
And because you can't change the credit card information, ultimately your kid could then go in and buy anything they want to, as much as they want to, and you'd have no way to stop them.
Those are both huge concerns so far.
So maybe by the holidays they'll have those things in there.
It's also worth noting that it's on an annual refresh cycle, so next year's Ouya might be fully addressing all of these issues and way better, right? It'll probably have a Tegra 4, it'll probably have more RAM, it'll probably hopefully cost the same amount of money, but be just as powerful or significantly more powerful and have addressed all of these hardware concerns. But we'll see. It's an interesting first start. It's not completely worthless, but it's not wonderful. That's for sure.
Right. I think that's a pretty good way to put it. So, Peter, are you going to sign up and get one now after that warm reception?
No, and not because I mean, as I was telling Ben before we started recording, when I do I love gaming, right? I mean, I create a joystick for a reason, right? And I just don't have a ton of time to play that much anymore. And so when I do, I want like the richest, highest quality experience I can justify, and that tends to be with a PS3 or right now PS3 or Xbox 360. I haven't had a PC gaming setup in a while, and I want to do that on a nice 1080p display, full, really high quality game. Like like I said last week, I'm trying to play Skyrim when I can find 5 minutes, and so
Should
playing
find 150 hours.
Yeah, I know exactly. If I can take a leave of absence from work
for
a
life,
few months, yeah.
For a few months.
And so for me, the Ouya is still. It's not. I mean, it's not really like the games that are available for it and that I think are probably going to be available for it are not things that I find like compelled to go out and find time to play,
Sure.
for better or for worse.
And Ben and I were just talking before that we're both trying to make our way through BioShock Infinite,
I
lacking
really wanna play.
lacking of time.
Yeah.
It's good enough that my wife is enjoying watching me play it, which is a pretty good sign for a game story. That if it's good enough for my wife to enjoy it, thank you, dear, for being so accommodating. That's a pretty good sign, I think, too. So
I can't suggest enough that people spend a bunch of time doing that.
I wish I had more
I
time.
may or may not be skipping plans with friends tonight to finish it. Maybe, perhaps. Hopefully they're not watching.
All right, so let's move on to discussions of a supposed Nexus 7 successor. This one came from Reuters rumor of a higher resolution, presumably we'd be talking 1080p, 7-inch tablet from Google and Asus with Qualcomm processing. And who knows?
That sounds like Google making another Nexus 7
I think
with
it'd be
better specs.
shocker.
I think
Get right out.
It'd be more surprising if they weren't
Right.
doing something. And,
Yeah.
It was enormously successful, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much
They're making
money they've
another.
actually
No way.
made, if indeed they've made any money on the thing. But it has been a very successful tablet
Sure.
for them, for sure. In terms of getting more Android tablets into the hands of people, and therefore giving developers an excuse to make tablet-friendly Android apps.
Yeah, I mean, I think them bumping up the resolution of the screen makes a lot of sense, and something that I think consumers are coming to expect.
Yeah.
And I think if there was a chief complaint about the iPad Mini, it was that the screen was really not nice enough, given the fact that it was late 2012 when it hit the market. To me, the big question is going to be, just personally, if they're going to be able to get a 4G version out at the same time as the Wi-Fi version. I think that they were able to do the HSPA Plus. It was, I think, maybe 5 months after the Wi-Fi version came out.
It was quite a while.
It took them a little while to get it out there, and they're
Why would
still
that be?
just because it can be more complex in terms of the software and maybe the sourcing.
I think of it as simple
the
as
chipset
like,
or
they're
something.
just sticking another radio in there. What could be so complex
No,
about
yeah,
that? But I don't-
unfortunately, it can. I mean, there probably wasn't a good reason except that maybe they had problems sourcing the chipsets or something
Sure,
like that.
sure.
But
Yeah, and there's carrier testing that needs to be involved.
yeah, or
Right,
maybe they
okay, that's a good point.
exactly, or maybe
Carrier
they
testing.
wanted to wait and see if the Nexus 7 sold well before they justified spending the money and to build more
Right.
with a 4G radio. But I would love to see them figure out how to do LTE, which I know has sort of bedeviled them with the Nexus phones.
Right.
The LTE is so fragmented in terms of which frequencies different carriers have, especially here in the U.S. There was a big hope that AT&T and Verizon would be able to unify on LTE, so you'd be able to take a handset from one and use it on the
Sadly.
other. That hasn't happened. And LTE is so fragmented across the globe that it's actually very, very difficult to create one phone that can be used on LTE carriers globally. It's not like HSPA Plus, which is a little more unified. So that's sort of the frustration for me. Is like if I have the Nexus 7 with the HSPA Plus, and I like it, but it'd be nice to be able to get an LTE version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hoping that this will be the year that they can really figure out LTE devices for the Nexus program. There's also been talk of it coming in cheaper, maybe even as low as $150, which would be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And also talk of a July release, which would be a little bit late for unveiling at I/O in May. I would expect it to come out closer to June.
Might be a little misdirection there.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. We'll see.
So you have a Nexus 7, you said?
Yeah.
And you have one as well?
Yes, I did the review, and then we bought one. My wife bought one, so we have one in the house.
Is there anything in particular you guys want to see from a new Nexus 7, other than, faster processor?
Better screen.
Better screen,
whatever.
yeah.
Thinner would be nice. It is a little bit chunky, especially compared to the iPad Mini these days. But
the bezel was a little narrower bezel would be nice.
Yep. But it's got a plasticky build quality, but the rubberized back I think actually works pretty well for it.
It's kind of ruggedy, right? Like it kind of looks like it could take some,
not
a lot of damage.
It's comfortable to hold.
You're not going to scratch the back,
right? Yes.
Or drop it easily too. Yeah, I think it was a very well designed device, and I don't think it'll take too much to really take it up another step and to make it more relevant. I think it's still a great buy today, even knowing that there's something coming. I think it's still a great buy.
Yeah.
Which is rare. I mean, there are how many other tablets that were released last summer that you would really consider buying today?
Yeah, I bought the 4G version. I guess late last year when it came out in November, so I probably bought it in December, maybe even early January, because I felt like there probably was going to be something replacing it for at least 6 months, but I think it's turning out to probably be about right. But also, it's still, in terms of looking at the market, it was the best option if you wanted a device, because it was, I think, $300 for the 4G version,
right?
And so,
which is great.
I mean, that's cheaper than the iPad Mini with the LTE would come in at, I think that was it.
500 something?
500, I think.
I think it's 500.
It's $329 for 16 gig, and
plus
if you wanted the 32, which is what the Nexus 7 comes in, it gets a little steeper from there.
Yeah.
And so, just in terms of value for money, it was great. And
sure.
I'm using an iPad right now, but a full-sized one. But in terms of the 7-inch model, I felt like that was the best.
What's it like owning 2 tablets? Do you own more than 2 tablets?
I don't know. I mean, I own more than one computer. So
do you?
Yeah, I have.
I mean, I have like other
4
MacBooks, but they're like older MacBooks. Like I don't use multiple ones in concurrence.
I use at least 2 computers every day.
Okay.
Yeah, and not counting the iPad.
And one of them isn't dedicated to gaming or anything? I mean, you're not playing that many games, probably. So.
No, I have one. I don't know if people are really that interested, but
I am that interested, Peter.
In my home office, I use an iMac with a 24-inch Dell monitor attached to it because I like a lot of real estate.
Yes.
And then in the living room, I keep a MacBook Air, which I also use when I travel.
Okay, so it's a comfort thing then. Just in terms of being at a desk versus being like.
It just depends. Yeah, it just depends on like where what the context is, and sometimes it's nice to be able to work in the kitchen and be around the family or whatever, rather than squirreled away in my little
blogger cave.
Well, I have like a 60 square foot home office like cave. Literally is like a little cave, and but also I mean it. One of the things that I think is that it forces what my philosophy is: try to pick the services which are the most platform agnostic in a sense, and Google actually has proven to be very agnostic, right? In the sense that like you can get Gmail on iOS and different, they're not just forcing you to use Android, and so I like being able to jump from device to device to device, which is it's nice and it's flexible, and you are able to kind of pick the best device for the context that you're in.
It's interesting that the argument could be made that Google is more platform agnostic than Facebook is at this point, despite the fact that Google owns one of those platforms. We were talking about the HTC One earlier, and we've talked about it a lot lately. It is hitting both AT&T and Sprint on April 19th. I think pre-orders started today for AT&T and tomorrow for Sprint, or the other way around. Either way, this week you can pre-order both. $199 for the 32 gigabyte version. The 64 gig is exclusive to AT&T for $300. And that's probably the one I would go for.
I like that phone. It's nice.
Very nice phone.
It's a very pretty phone.
Nice. Very nice phone indeed. So if you want one on the 19th, better get your order in, or you might have to actually go to the store on the 19th.
I think it might be a little limited too, because
store.
I know that they're. I think they're.
Gross.
My guess is that there's going to be a limited supply at launch.
Yeah, HTC isn't the kind of company that would make millions and millions and millions and millions and have them ready to roll on day one. At least not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Maybe this Facebook partnership, though.
It's going to blow wide open.
Although it is a bit of a bummer that the one is actually coming a week later than the first. We figured it out. We figured out the name.
It comes first.
The first comes first before the one. There you go.
And it is the same day that
it only took us
T-Mobile
40
gets
minutes.
the iPhone 5.
Interesting.
Which is the 12th.
Interesting.
I don't know that there's a ton of... I wonder that... I haven't had anybody ask me about an HTC One, right? Like when there's a new iPhone thing or even the Galaxy S4, like I have friends who don't read about tech stuff. They're like, hey, did you hear about that phone thing? You work at a thing that people cover tech at. And nobody's asking about HTC's One.
The
right? Like,
awareness
no one's
is
ever
really
asked me
low.
about that.
We've talked about...
That's like HTC's
I think it's like
big
the fourth
ongoing
podcast
problem.
in a row we've had to talk about.
Yeah.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I've heard that Darren talk about this like a bunch, right?
Way to
when
not
he
listen to
says
the
this,
podcast,
but,
Ben. Thanks for bringing
No, I know
beating
this is
the
like a
dead
recurring
horse.
theme among Engadget editors even.
We're actually
going
going
to
to do a
talk about
spin-off
this a lot.
podcast just about
HTC's branding
HTC's
problem.
marketing
the podcast.
issues.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I know that they're just starting to ramp up their efforts, and as far as I know, I think Monday is the day when you're going to start to see them doing a big push around that.
I'm going to see obnoxious ads on Hulu that I watched 3 times each
Hopefully.
on each commercial break.
Yeah.
This
I've been seeing
ad
that next big
recommended
thing commercial.
because you picked on HTC
enough.
on the Engadget podcast.
Well, I'm curious to see what they do differently than what they've done before, because I think that as we all know, their marketing has been very understated in the past, and
Quietly brilliant.
They are not going to have to. They're not going to be able to get away with that anymore.
It needs to be more like loudly wide selling. That
Yep.
sounds like a better.
Vocally awesome.
There you go.
So Tim Cook took the pretty unusual step of apologizing to basically the entire Chinese market this week on April 1st. Conveniently enough, there was a lot of complaints for the past couple of weeks that were really causing a lot of furor in the Chinese market, where Apple was basically having different warranty policies in the Chinese market than they were elsewhere in the world. For example, if you were to get a replacement device, it'd quite often be a refurbished device. If you had components replaced, it'd again quite often be refurbished. And the warranty on the iPad battery is only a year versus 2 years elsewhere. So things like that were making people over there a little bit upset, and rightfully so, I think. So Tim apologized this week, basically said that now they will be using new components for warranty repairs and replacements, which is great. Although the iPad warranty is still going to be different than elsewhere in the world, which is a bit of a bummer. 2-year warranty on key components, quote unquote, or the battery. In the accessories only have 1 year. But they will be strengthening the supervision and training for the Apple authorized service providers, which means that, presumably there were probably some people who were maybe doing some shady dealings and handling these warranty repairs. And so Apple will be getting a little bit more involved in policing on that front, which is good news for everybody.
I wonder why the policy is still slightly different, though, in China than everywhere else on the planet.
I wonder that too. If there's something different about, the way that people in that market are using the iPad that would damage the battery in a different way, or if there's some. I was trying to think about that too. If there's some different. Maybe we should talk to Richard Lai about that and see if he can say. But I couldn't come up with anything myself.
Right.
Yeah, I was familiar of why there would be that policy, or familiar with the reason for why there would be that policy.
Yeah, but they're also now falling in line with I think the 3 guarantees is the name of the law for Chinese warranties, which basically says one of the rules being if you do get a replacement device, the warranty now basically resets, which is pretty nice. I mean, think about if your phone breaks after a year but it's still under warranty, your warranty would then begin again. Yeah, the 3 guarantees law, which is repair, refund, and replace.
I think Apple also had to conform to the warranty laws in Italy. Was that last year? I think
Yeah,
they were out of sync with the warranty policies there, and so I had to conform. I mean, it's what you have to do if you want to do business in a certain country, and
Sure.
I mean, I wonder if there was something related to the cost of service or something like that. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be. It's not like they have to ship the parts very far.
No.
Put them on a truck, drive across the
Yeah,
street.
exactly. Maybe they were finding a higher defect rate in China. I mean, sometimes you see regional variations like that, depending on culturally how people use the devices or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Could be a different return culture. Is there a culture around merchandise returns anywhere in the world? I don't know, but
If there is, it's probably
Could be very different.
More aggressive here in the U.S. than elsewhere in the world.
You'd
But I
think,
could be
right?
wrong.
Having worked retail many Januaries.
Oh man.
Yeah, I
have.
can't imagine
Oh,
that it's
man.
much worse
I don't
anywhere
miss
else
the
in the
retail
world for
days.
that. No,
Used
no,
to
I
be
don't.
a computer salesman and technician back in the day, which was, yeah. Obviously, the technician part was much more fun than the sales part.
I imagine so. Yes.
We'll recount that some other day on Engadget After Hours podcast. Let's move on to Michael Dell sending out a memo, which was actually submitted to the SEC. So really throwing it out there. Basically talking about what his plans are for a private Dell. When the plans came out that indeed Dell was going private or attempting to go private, we talked a little bit about what could they be doing to really turn the company around, and ultimately his changes are really not that significant, or at least not that different from what they're doing now. They do want to make a significant increase in investment in PCs and tablets, which makes sense. Hopefully we weighed more toward the tablet side than the PC side. But his other big changes are bringing on more salespeople and doing more research as well into what consumers need. I mean, research makes sense, of course. Salespeople, certainly you need salespeople to sell things. And specifically, we're talking corporate sales here, not
Salespeople to sell
not
things?
retail sales.
Get right out.
And then, but ultimately it sounds like a slightly more focused, but ultimately no major changes for Dell. I mean, which is probably not a surprise. I don't think any of us are really expecting a big change.
Dell's in a tough spot. The market's really changed, and they still do very well, especially on the enterprise side of things. But they are, the growth in the market, at least, is shifting towards mobile and towards tablet, and their only solution is really, they're so tied to Microsoft, and Microsoft has not delivered so much in that area. It's been a real challenge for them, and Dell's forays into Android have not been especially successful.
It's strange because I remember growing up in schools with Dells, where that was a pretty ubiquitous computer.
Dell 2000s.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was what was it? What was the other 2000 company?
Gateway.
Gateway 2000.
Yes,
Never
Gateway
mind.
2000. There's a lot of those as well. Yes,
Yes.
but like these
Been a long time.
places where I traditionally use Dells have shifted to. I mean, Macs a lot of time was what I see now in schools and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not hanging out in lots of middle schools these days, thankfully, but. That sounds so creepy.
Also, a
Everything
topic
about
we'll
that
be
sounded
covering
creepy.
on the
Yeah.
Engadget After
Oh,
Hours
geez.
podcast.
I've been banned from all the middle schools, so I can't go there anymore.
I can't go hang out in middle schools and watch the kids use the computers anymore, sadly. No, but the places that, like, by the time I reached university, I should say that there was Apples everywhere, and my mom was a psychologist in schools for years, and that has all shifted, right? Like a lot of that stuff has shifted to iMacs or whatever else, and
Or
I don't know if
back
that's-
to Apple.
Yeah,
Because
right.
in the 80s,
It was.
Apple was so ubiquitous.
Yeah,
in
back when I was
schools.
in
They
school.
had a big program of trying to sell aggressively to the education market.
Yeah, so you could play
which really
Oregon
fell
Trail.
off in the 90s. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Like the Macintosh itself, specifically, I remember. Like,
Mac
well,
Classic was
Apple
big.
II.
Classic
Apple
Macintosh.
IIe.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah, the Apple
absolutely.
IIe is what I learned basic on, and then the Mac Classic was always the one that we learned word processing on
Yeah.
because it actually had a GUI interface. But yeah, Macs were very ubiquitous when I was in school, which was high school in the early to mid 90s for me anyway.
But the only thing I pay attention to them for nowadays really is I believe they own Alienware. I believe that is the case.
I believe that is the case.
And otherwise, though, I mean, they haven't really. That's the kind of PC market that I've been looking at, right? Like when I look at PC stuff, it's for gaming stuff.
Sure.
And I mean, this is personal, of course, but
Mhm.
yeah, their computers on that side of things are. They don't address that at all. I think that they leave all of that to Alienware, and I don't know. It just hasn't been something that's been on my radar at all for the past decade.
And full credit
something
to,
like
to Dell, the acquisition of Alienware, that could have gone horribly.
Sure.
It could have gone better. I mean, they could have really built out that line, I think, and done a lot more with it. But ultimately, Alienware is still well respected,
Sure.
and that could have gone
Yeah.
pretty poorly.
Yeah.
By the way, Gadget Hero just called you the godfather of all modern tech sites, Peter. So I thought I'd
That's
just
a
call
very
it out.
nice thing to say.
That is a very nice thing to say.
Thank you.
So Dell,
No, I haven't had anyone offed. Or,
not that you're willing to admit to on the air.
though there are some people who I wish I might someday have them wake up with a horse's head.
Yet again, another reason to tune into the Engadget After Hours podcast, which we might actually have to start one of these days. Starting the Engadget After, we always
Can
threaten to.
I drink martinis in that and
Oh,
wear
you
a nice
can-
suit?
you can
I'm
drink
fully ready
martinis
for
in
that.
this
Engadget
podcast if
After
you like
Dark.
to.
That sounds great.
Brian has had beers and various other forms of alcohol on many
Yeah.
occasions in this here podcast.
Have
So
to keep it classy with my
we talked about LTE on T-Mobile a little bit before, and some interesting developments on this front. So the Lumia 810, which is the Windows Phone, the best Windows Phone option on T-Mobile at this point, is not going to get the LTE update that T-Mobile had earlier promised. They said back in January it would get a software update that would turn on LTE, much like the Galaxy Note 2 and a few others have received. They've now said, no, we're not actually going to do that. But I think it was T-Mo News who got a leaked memo stating that T-Mobile will release an update for current iPhone 5s to enable LTE on those devices on the T-Mobile network, which to me is a bit of a... I mean, obviously there are probably going to be more iPhone 5 users on T-Mobile's network than Lumia A10 users, but still that's a bit of a... If indeed this is true, that's a bit of a bummer, I would say. I think that's a good way to put it, a bummer.
So T-Mo is the 4th biggest player, right, in the market?
Mm-hmm.
So by market share, what is that? I mean, is that like 5% or is that 20% or is that... It's not huge, right?
That's a good question. I would say somewhere in the
I think
5
after
to
the Metro
15%,
PCS
something like that.
Yeah,
acquisition,
10
more,
15%,
right?
I would guess.
Yeah, and then you got to figure Lumia A10 users are,
A small fraction of that.
Yeah,
right?
a very small
Yeah.
fraction of that too.
I mean, it stinks, but I just wonder how many people it really affects. Is what I'm kind of.
Well,
trying to get at here.
I think if you promise something and then
Yeah.
renege and it
No
affects
matter
one
what.
person,
Yeah.
and they're
It's
going
not
to.
okay. Absolutely.
I mean, by the same token, I don't think any bought the Lumia A10 expecting it to get LTE.
Right.
And so.
I'm sure somebody did. And somebody's going to send me an email about how angry he
But
is.
had they confirmed that it was going to get an LTE upgrade at launch, or was it something they just talked about doing?
That's a good question. It was in January. I'm not sure. I think it might have launched a little bit before that. So that's true. It might have come after that. But still, it's a bit of a... Whenever somebody kind of backs away from a promise like that, even though it is indeed for a limited number of users. Yeah, indeed it's probably because sales were not exactly great and they did.
It's hard to
didn't want
justify.
the investment in there.
Well, and also I think it's something that often Nokia will say to T-Mobile, like, sure, we'll work on this, but you have to subsidize it or pay for part of it or bear some of the costs or whatever.
Sure.
And it could have been that T-Mobile said, well, we don't want to pay for it either.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, and they said, okay, fine, we just
We already sold you the phone.
Exactly.
What do you got to do about it?
Bizarrely, this happens with
Thanks, Godfather.
with like game patches and stuff, where they'll promise a developer will promise a game is going to be patched
Yeah.
to fix issues, and it costs thousands of dollars to develop a patch, and then you have to push it through certification and whatever, and it becomes like, well, we can do this and satisfy the very small % of our user base that it affects, or we can not spend tens of thousands of dollars, and so they decide not to because business.
Or the way they go
Yeah.
the way of LucasArts, and then they'll
Yeah,
never
they
be
completely get closed.
Yeah,
That's not on our news docket, is it?
No, but we
Oh,
should
it's so
let's
sad.
talk about that. Let's spare a moment for LucasArts, the creator of so many great adventure
Yeah.
games over the years and so many mediocre Star Wars games over the years. But ultimately,
Masters of Terras Kasai. You don't like that? You're not a fan of fighting games?
No.
Star Wars characters?
No.
I'm sorry, it's a deep cut. I know this is a weird reference.
I never
here,
even
but
heard of this one.
It's terrible. It's
yeah.
a terrible fighting game. A
Yep.
Star Wars fighting game.
Yep. I was like, oh wow, Star Wars. Oh no.
No, it's not good. It's not
Yeah,
good.
I mean, pick an amazing adventure game in the early days of PC
Loom.
computing.
I'm just joking. But Grim Fandango, Maniac Mansion, lots of classic adventure games from there.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that the PC gaming was probably pushed forward a lot, and the adoption of PCs for gaming was definitely LucasArts had a huge impact on that. It's
Absolutely.
Really,
Yeah.
it's a shame. But ultimately, I think a lot of that legacy has been lost over the past decade or so. Anyway, as they moved more toward kind of churning out these Star Wars games, some of which were decent. A lot
TIE
of
Fighter
which
was
were not.
great. That's a great game. Some of the ones for Super Nintendo were really good.
I'm still waiting for a TIE Fighter reboot.
People have
Maybe-
been waiting for 15 years.
Man, that was
It's coming
nice.
anytime
Not
soon.
My
gonna
friend and I
wait, not
used
gonna
to
happen.
spend
Yeah.
hours playing the I think it was the TIE Advance that you could do the multiplayer in.
I think. I don't
But
know.
yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah, we do land strikes against the rebel fleets, and man, that was amazing.
That sounds like a good time.
Oh,
So,
so
and maybe I missed this part of the story, but surely they are going to continue to have. I mean, now that Disney owns the brand
Yeah.
and the universe, I mean, surely they're not going to not take advantage of the ability to create games around the franchise.
So they're licensing everything, is what they've said. They're turning everything LucasArts into licensing opportunities.
Yeah.
And they've already done some of this in the past few years, like Connect Star Wars, the nightmarish abomination that it is, was licensed out to a third-party developer who just created it, and then LucasArts slaps their name on it, and they spit it out.
So maybe 343 Industries Star Wars game, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Bungie
That's the
Star Wars
question.
game?
That it could be any of these things. They had Star Wars 1313 in development between LucasArts,
which
and
actually looks pretty okay. I thought.
Yeah, that looked. It looked like a game that was still very far out, but had some promise, and that got outright canceled there was another Xbox Live Arcade, like kind of smaller game that I can't remember. It's like First Assault or something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but it got canceled as well.
So we're gonna see like Call of Duty, Star Wars edition.
Yeah, they could do something like that. As depressing as it is, hopefully that would never happen. Hopefully they would do something smarter than that, but.
It could be fun.
It could be fun, sure.
Grand
that's
Theft
what Star Wars
Auto,
Battlefront was.
Coruscant
Sort of.
City.
Oh, man.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds kind of awesome. Actually, that would be fun. That I'm into.
That they should just go nuts.
Yeah.
Just be stupid.
That would be better than the past few years though have been. The last real Star Wars game was the Force Unleashed games, and those
Right.
were
Those are pretty good.
they're okay.
Pretty all
They're
right.
fine. Yeah, they're not groundbreaking, but they're fine. But sadly, yes, the end of I think it's fair to say fully cliched and end of an era, and in that they were hugely influential, and I mean beyond games too, right? Like LucasArts
Right.
as a studio is
Yeah.
a big deal. So yeah.
Well, thankfully, Tim Schafer is still doing stuff. You know, he kind of wet his teeth there in the early days, and he's still doing awesome stuff elsewhere. So keep the legacy strong, Tim. Joe, did you say that you just got an Ouya shipping email? Is that... No.
That's got to be another Joe.
Okay. All right. Never mind. Big thumbs down from Jopie. Never mind. I was trying to bring some breaking news to the podcast, so that's not happening. News from Tesla this week. They actually shipped more Model S's in the first quarter than they thought they would. 4,750 versus 4,500. So that's good news for Tesla, and good news if you're fans of future American car manufacturing, that kind of thing.
They're all in San Francisco. I've seen them
I've
all
seen
there.
like 2 on the East Coast.
I've seen
I saw one last
like
week
a dozen there.
on
It's
Canal
crazy.
Street.
Canal
Really?
Street, even.
Yeah, a
Wow.
white
Wow.
one.
I've still never seen one in New York.
They
or
tend to be
anywhere
white. That seems to be
other
the
than
popular
San
car. It looks
I was
nice.
hoping that Ryan had driven his across country.
Oh, he has one?
That'd be impressive.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he just
man.
picked one up.
Yeah, he drove me around in it in SF.
What a
Sweet.
bum.
Very sweet.
What a lucky bum.
I know.
They killed the 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, which was there was a lot of talk about this being a $60,000 really high-end EV. Now it's a $70,000 really high-end EV because the 40 kilowatt hour was the smallest pack. They are actually going to be... So only 4% of backers or early orderers bought the 40 kilowatt hour pack, which is probably a couple hundred people. You will still be able to get, or those people will get a car at that price, but what they'll get is a 60 kilowatt hour pack, but software limited to 40 kilowatt hours, which is kind of interesting. So they'll actually get the bigger battery pack, they just won't be able to use it. But if they want to at some point, they can call Tesla and pay $11,000, and they will flip the switch and let them have the full access to the battery
What?
pack.
That is amazing.
Why can't they just have full access without having to pay
They
$11,000?
didn't pay for it.
This
That's
actually
what?
this actually happens a lot. I mean, it's a lot like DLC that's already on the disc or something
Right.
like that. Same sort of thing, which people
But
hate.
not $11,000.
But like, if you buy a luxury car and you don't pay for the heated seats, the elements are actually in the seats. They're just pretty much deactivated.
That's so
there's-
depressing.
that actually happens a lot in the automotive world. But it is really kind of sad and depressing.
So they're not charging you for the actual cost of the thing. They're just charging
Right.
you to charge you.
They're charging you
Great.
for the privilege of having access
That
to
makes
it.
that would make me not want to buy a Tesla altogether as a result, which is a totally infantile response, but fully I'm
Yeah.
a full infant. So
I did get the chance to speak with Elon Musk yesterday, which the interview will be coming up tomorrow on the site. Asked him about that and a bunch of other things. He basically said that the car just wasn't that good beyond the range and beyond not many people buying it because the battery pack was smaller. They actually had to cut down the power of the car too. He said it just really wasn't fun to drive. So that was a part of why they killed it. And with a 60 kilowatt hour pack, software limited, it will still drive like the faster car. So that's something anyway. But really great conversation with Mr. Musk. He's a fascinating dude. We talked about SpaceX a little bit. We talked about this change and also their new leasing program, which rather sadly
It's convoluted.
Yeah, he kind of teased that a lot and got people really excited for some big breaking news out of Tesla, and it turned out to be a leasing program, which I think a lot of people, myself included, were a little bit disappointed.
what is it, like $700 a month or something?
It's between $500 and $1,100, I think, with a $1,250 or $10,000 down payment.
Steep.
It's not cheap. It's
No.
not cheap by any means. But if you do the math, if you look at, he makes the case, if you do the math, if you look at the cost of fuel that you'd be saving and the cost of maintenance, because there really is no maintenance on the Model S, it charges for free the superchargers. If you factor all that in, then it becomes an affordable car. And it does in best case scenario. But ultimately, we don't live always in a best case scenario world.
No. I don't buy phones off contract either.
And finally, at least from my rundown list, we've got BBM Music shutting down. That was a service that they launched the end of 2011. I think it was around, well, they were trying to, get a little bit more excitement around the BlackBerry brand at the time. Obviously, it wasn't a huge success.
Not at all. And they
Yeah.
also wanted to have something that kind of pivoted off of BlackBerry Messenger.
Right.
And I think there was this idea where you could you could get like I think 50 tracks, and
Yep.
then if you did some sort of sharing, you could get access more. Like the mechanics were really bizarre.
Sounds like Columbia House.
Yeah. It was all the streaming that you wanted. You could only download 50 tracks into a custom playlist, and then you could access the custom playlist of all of your friends. So in theory, you could
Yeah.
listen to more if you had more friends, and you could, of course, then encourage your friends to get on BBM Music as well. But yeah, that 50 track limitation. I mean, if you go on Spotify, there is a limit to how many tracks you can download on Spotify, but it's like 1,000.
1,000,
Yeah. So yeah, it just unfortunately feels a little bit limited, or felt a little bit limited, but now it's gone. BlackBerry's recommending you go to Rdio instead at this point. Which is
Do they have a
good of them.
deal with them or something?
I don't
I'm
think
sure
so.
they do. No, I'm
Oh,
sure the
yeah.
RDO probably paid them. Yeah.
This was probably just a skin over Rdio anyway to begin with that they were playing around with. Yeah, I'm curious to. I mean, as ever, I would love to know how much they were spending to get access to this music and how many subscribers actually got. Presumably, they spent a lot of money to make these relationships, and ultimately,
Maybe they sell those contracts and make some of that money back.
I bet Peter knows every number.
Well, having negotiated with major labels before, I can tell you that they extract a lot of money from you.
Yeah, I bet. All right, we got some questions. Let's see. Trevor Samples in chat asked, do you think some other launchers might take some features from the Facebook Home, such as chat, and use it in their launcher? So could we see some copycat launchers that kind of, we've seen a lot of launchers, we talked about that before, that make the phone easier to use or add more functionality. But I don't think we've seen any that are really social focused like this. Might there be some other launchers that take a cue from this?
I feel like we've seen at least options in some of the launchers for better surfacing social stuff. I don't know if anything quite at this level, but I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook Home certainly took off, that you might see some of the other launchers trying to pivot and incorporate some of the incorporating Facebook and Twitter and things in other ways. I mean, you could certainly see somebody, and if there's one thing I've learned from Android is that people like to clone things. So somebody cloning Home, or like the style, the look and feel, and those sorts of things, which might not, if you unpack the APK, you might be able to basically strip out some of the Facebook stuff or layer in Twitter and other services. It's certainly possible. It might not be distributable through to the Play Store, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody went and either copied it or reworked it to pull in Foursquare and Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever other services people want to use.
That's so much more interesting to me. That's something I would use.
Well, that's the thing, is that's Blink Feed on the one, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you can kind of get. So, I mean, that's like we were saying. I mean, like we were saying earlier, and that's what's so interesting is that like HTC kind of already addressed a lot of this stuff with Blink Feed, and so it's interesting to see that you can get something that's in some ways more limited.
Alan Dan's on Twitter. This is a good question for you, Ben. Given the lackluster Ouya reviews, how much pressure is there on the Game Stick now? The Game Stick, of course, was the second big Kickstarter success of an Android gaming console.
Yeah, I'm really incredibly surprised at the success of the Game Stick, from the bizarre name to the fact that it's more or less something that is meant to kind of shoehorn in the Play Jam store, which is an existing like kind of casual gaming store on a variety of smart TVs. It's the Game Stick seems very much aimed at almost at hotels or something like that. Like other places that could use a strange additional selection of games. It doesn't seem like something that consumers would want to bring into their house, even for kids necessarily. I don't know that there's a ton of pressure on GameStick. GameStick hasn't really revealed that they don't really have like a game submissions process. Ouya has a curator for the store, when Kelly Santiago, who helped develop Journey and has a great background in game development. So she's kind of an ideal candidate for that position. And GameStick doesn't really have a person like that. GameStick, while the tech is very similar, doesn't seem to be the same, like targeting the same folks as the Ouya, right? The Ouya very much seems like a consumer device, whereas the GameStick seems like sort of a consumer device. It's also not very much aimed at hackers or anything like that. It's a very different thing. I'm not really sure who the GameStick is for at all, actually, other than like the kind of hotel market, which they're not targeting enterprise, so I don't know. It's a very strange. It's like an even weirder thing to me than the Ouya is what I'm trying to say.
Bryn Rogers in chat. Do you think it's possible to change the launcher on the HTC first? That was definitely something I was wondering too. Hopefully somebody on the ground can ask that question. I'm curious about that myself. I don't think that they'll make it easy, but
I would be stunned if you couldn't.
You think? You think
Yeah.
there'll be an easy option to remove it?
I'm not going to say it's an easy
Well,
option,
yeah.
but-
I mean, I'm sure you could root the phone and put a
But I
custom
think
ROM
that,
on there.
well, not even root. I think that you could go, I mean, if you can remove the launcher, I think you can replace the launcher on any Android phone because of the way that it's designed to work in Android. And I think you would have to go into settings and then clear. Basically, what it does is the way that you set up an alternative launcher is, when it launches, like I said, if it launches for the first time, it says you always want this to be your home app, so to speak. And then to disable that, you have to either install and launch another launcher, or you have to go into settings and then clear your preferences for that app. And then next time you press the home button, it'll give you the option to pick your launcher. And then again, do you want to set this as?
There's just an option that says like turn off this launcher.
Well, there are not within the launcher,
Right?
And there are actually other apps that it's called like home screen pickers and things like that. Well, it makes it very easy to switch between home screens.
This seems crazy. You have to install an app to choose between the ability to launch launchers. Like that should be built into the Android. No?
Well, but from the perspective of I think from the people that from Google's perspective, it's probably more confusing to have that option built in when most people are not going to have more than one launcher installed.
Okay.
So-
Sure.
So you think they won't block it? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they make it a little bit more complicated than that and hide that option.
Yeah.
But
Specifically with the first.
right. Only with the first, yeah.
Right.
And then a related
Well, it might not
question-
have, we might not have like an option. I mean, there might not be any stock launcher to discover.
You might have to install your own.
That's what
and
I'm saying.
then-
I think it'll be like TouchWiz, where there's no way to get to the underlying stock Android experience. But I think that if I installed Nova, I think it'd be very difficult for them to block that from being used.
Let's see. Mike Sorrento asking, do you think that the home interface will be easy enough for a user to install? While advanced users use Nova and other launchers, it's never been something I'd expect my parents or non-techies to get into. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this will definitely be very easy to use. If they weren't able to make it easier to use, I don't think that they would make such a big deal about it.
Yeah.
The question is, will it be easy to get back again? And I guess that's a different question.
I'm
and that
so
we don't know
curious
about.
to see how this plays out on iOS, just because it's.
Yeah.
I mean, they're clearly not. It wouldn't make any sense that iOS would allow them to do it, like you guys said.
Yeah,
and,
it's
like,
very strange for them to just isolate half the smartphone market.
Right.
like that.
It's like really splitting the market there, and it's very strange. I don't know.
And then Tass in chat asking a question: when is the next Apple event? And well, the only one we know about is WWDC this summer, though we don't know the exact dates of that. Presumably, it's going to be June-ish. But there's been a lot of talk about an April event for something to do with a new iPad, and it seems reasonably solid that there'll be something happening in April. I mean, it's been a long time since a proper Apple event. Usually, there's one in January. There wasn't one this year. There was the T-Mobile thing, which is sort of an Apple event, but ultimately, it wasn't one of their big ones.
For the last 2 years, there's been one stacked on top of GDC, and they didn't do that this year.
It's been the longest we've gone without an Apple keynote
Right.
in recent memory. I mean, I think it's been years since we've gone this long without one. And I think part of the reason is that Apple sort of harmonized its product launches for the fall. And so we saw in the fall a new iPad, new iPhone, the refresh on the MacBooks and things like that happened in second half of last year. And so I don't think that they necessarily have anything ready right now. We might see an update to the iPad, and there have been some indications with the price drops. I think the price cuts on the iPad. I think on the iPad 3, they've cut the price on. I could be wrong about that, but there definitely been some indications that they might have something coming up, but it may not be until June that we see something. And and it's still not clear when they're going to have something that isn't a successor to something that we already know about, whether it's a watch or a TV or some other product or whatever. We know that this year they're going to announce new iPads and new MacBooks and new
There will
iPhones.
be an iPhone 5S.
Yeah.
Surprise.
But beyond that, it's not really clear what we can expect.
I'm fingers crossed for a Retina MacBook Air this year.
I
That's all
think
I
it's
want.
a good.
It's happening. Eventually, it's going to
Yeah,
happen, right?
I'm
like that's
do-
not a maybe thing. Like I feel like
It'll
that has to
eventually happen. It'll eventually
I
happen.
just want it now. because
Yeah,
they're
me too.
pretty, and I like my Air.
I'm due for an update, but I don't. I'm in that uncomfortable situation where it's time for a new laptop, but I'm
Holding off.
There
kinda
isn't one that
waiting.
you want yet.
Yeah, I mean, I probably. I'm torn between the Air and the Retina Pro. So
I
yeah,
will
that's
refuse
the
to go back
situation.
to a non-Air for life, for work, for the job we do,
Yeah,
right?
they're
Like if
pretty
I'm at
great.
home,
They're
I
pretty
use an
great.
iMac, whatever, that's fine, or something else. It doesn't matter. But if I'm out and I'm at some convention center or something, like I'm never not carrying an Air ever again. It's like
Yeah.
amazing.
13-inch Retina MacBook Pro is not that much heavier than a
No,
MacBook
it's not,
Air.
it's not.
It's what, half a pound, I think.
Well, it's also the
Not that that's
thicker.
nothing,
the
but
space
Right.
it takes up in my bag too,
Yeah.
right? It's not tremendously different. You're absolutely right, but
Yep.
yeah.
All right, I think that's going to call this podcast to a close. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Thanks.
It's been a wonderful time as ever. Thank you, Brian, for not joining us today.
That's right.
But I don't know if he'll be back next week either.
Maybe I'll be back.
I don't know.
I don't know about that.
I don't know about that guy.
I only have one nice shirt, so you gotta space it out.
Thank you all for listening and or watching. And some of us will be back. We don't know who yet, but some of us will be back next week for another episode of the Engadget Podcast.